Welcome everybody to the TPG Leadership Series. Hopefully my screen is sharing here. And today we're tackling a topic, an age-old debate. What is a leader? What is a manager? How do you test for leadership capability? And I'm happy to share some of the framework that we use here at the Phillips Group, which we've developed over the last 36 years of placing board members and CEOs all over the world. And to complement the dialogue, we also have an extremely seasoned co-host, a man hailing from Australia who's had an international career, who's been a divisional head of HR for Procter & Gamble, running the entire prestige care and fragrance business across Asia. So this is a massive business. And then he was one of 3 global chief human resource officers for Maersk Shipping, where he looked after 100 countries. Again, a massive exposure to leadership selection and years and years of watching leadership performance. So give us a good insight into, what are the psychological markers? What are the traits we want to be looking for that allow a leader to drive peak performance under any condition? He then went on to work at First Abu Dhabi Bank as the group chief human resource officer. And now he is in a very exciting role as a vice president, people and culture at Plastic Bank. Please welcome Mr. Peter Baker.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Shane. It is great to be here with you today. This is a wonderful topic, and I wanted to be part of this discussion to learn from each other and also to contribute. Yeah, I'm currently with Plastic Bank now. We are powering the regenerative society. We have collected almost 2 billion bottles of plastic before it goes into the ocean, and we recycle that and essentially improve the ocean. So it's a wonderful mandate. But one of the things I realized in that role, and stepping out from a role in a bank and stepping out from roles at Procter & Gamble and Maersk, is that all organizations of all sizes are looking for great leaders, and it's one of the great topics that we have today. I'm delighted to be partnering here with Shane, one of the premier headhunters or executive search consultants here in the Middle East and globally, has significant experience placing CEOs, placing board members, placing business leaders, and that's why I'm delighted to be part of this session today to learn from Shane and to learn with each of you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Pete. So today, just to clarify, because we only have an hour, so I can't cover everything that we look at when we look at leadership. So this is what we're going to be covering is identity. So when you look at, this is the framework that we actually use. I don't know if you can see it. And You can see that there's several points. There's actually 8 or 9 key areas that we look at. Today, I'm just going to be looking at one of them. And if you want more, of course, you can grab the book, CEO Assessment Selection. If you just Google CEO Assessment Selection, will come up, or you can buy it directly from us. But identity is really the one that I'm going to talk about today. And this has to be at the crux of any assessment that you do for any role, because it doesn't make any sense for you to go ahead and hire someone into a bank who doesn't want to be a banker. As we know, in the Middle East, there's a group of people who feel that banking is haram. They don't want to be bankers. So don't hire them. You don't go and hire somebody into a CEO position. You won't believe that I've actually been in rooms where the leadership team has selected a candidate internally to become a CEO. And when you sit with that candidate, they don't actually want to be a CEO. And of course, it ends badly. It will end badly. So at the crux of your identity, of your performance, is your identity. And we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to show you some examples, live examples also from the landscape, actual CEOs that we've interacted with. And how their performance and their identity is intricately related. And we're going to also talk about a bit of the separation between leaders and managers. And next week, we're going to talk about how do you manage a team. So if we're assessing someone, what are the things we look at to tell if they can manage the team effectively? And this session is, we're looking at what are the things that we look for to tell if they can lead a team effectively. Now, these two things are very different, but on the outside, the result can seem the same. You can see someone who's leading and someone who's managing, and they both deliver a similar result. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about peak performance and how identity really drives peak performance. I'm going to give you some hard and fast examples of that as well. And then we're going to give you, 5, 6 easy questions you can ask in any interview, which will really help you understand what is the identity of your candidate. How do they identify themselves? So this is a famous scene. Does anyone recognize this scene? People were laughing. They're like, you can't put this in because, these gentlemen are not dressed in a Sharia compliant manner, of course, but nobody recognizes this scene, or is it in the chat box? Did anyone get it? This is a scene from 300. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, George. It's a scene from 300. And this is really an expression of their identity. So when the person comes to give them a message, he has that famous movement, that action. He kicks the person into the hole and he says, "This is Sparta." And at that point, he's expressing his identity and what it means to be a Spartan. And further on in the movie, when they're marching to go to meet the Persians in battle, they come up with another tribe and they say, "Oh, you haven't brought that many warriors with you. You haven't brought that many soldiers. You only brought 300. We have so many." And then he says, "You, sir, what is your profession?" And he says, "I'm a potter." "And you, sir, what is your profession?" And he says, "Blacksmith." And he says, "You, sir, what is your profession?" And he says, "I'm a farmer." And then he says, "Spartans, what is your profession?" And they say, "Warriors." And he says, "You see, I did bring more soldiers than you today." And they march on. And of course, at the crux of that fight, they have been bred, they have been taught that their job is to fight to the death to protect their people. And you can see the expression in the leader when he kicks this person over the edge. And he says, "This is Sparta." Now, if you are a follower, what does it mean for your identity? If I am a junior person under this leader and I watch him kick this person down this pipe, what am I seeing? He's brave, he's courageous, he's fearless, he's willing to fight to the death for his city. And so who will I become if I follow him? What will my identity be if I follow this person? This is a much different question than a manager will be answering the question, "What do I get?" "Hey, by the way, help us fight the Persians and I'll give you, $500,000 or 500 gold coins or whatever." No, I'm going to give you an identity of being a Spartan. And in fact, you see someone try to join the battle who is not accepted by the Spartans because he's not strong enough or whatever his issues are. So at the crux of your peak performance is identity. And when I sit with clients all around the world, I have historically, chronically, and habitually seen an absence of identity into the formal assessment protocol. And I really wonder what they're doing. I'll give you just another quick example because I know my colleague here, Mr. Peter Baker, is going to be firing his slings and arrows at me shortly. And that's fine. This is an amazing expression of identity. So when we talk about what drives peak performance, and this has to be your job as a leader, this has to be your lodestar, is that I'm here to push this team to peak performance, and we're going to have a better performance than anybody else in the world. We're going to outperform the market, and we're going to outperform the industry. So and what I'm saying as a leader, at the crux of that performance has to be your identity, is who you perceive yourself. Who are you as an individual? And here we see Genghis Khan, the man who believed his purpose was to unite the Mongol tribes, which no one had ever done. And when he takes over a particular city, this is a true quote from him, and he lines up all the leaders of that city. And he says, "Oh, people, know that you've created great sins, and the great ones of you have committed these sins. And if you ask me what proof I have, it's because I am the punishment of God. And if you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Who says something like that? That is, borderline delusional. But if you're reporting to him, what sense of identity do you have? You're on a mission from God. You're the hand of God on earth. You're the shadow of God on earth. We're cleansing the world. We are uniting the tribes. We're on a mission that is far greater than any salary, than anything that you can offer me as a manager. What you have now given me is my identity, that I am a Mongol and I am following Genghis Khan, and we are the punishment of God. Slightly intimidating approach, but you can see the power.
And I guess that's the point at which to come in here, Shane. Let me pause here. I mean, we're hiring someone for a job. And I guess I'm really curious if you could really double click on this idea of identity. Is even a CEO is a human being who you're effectively renting out their skills to help you accomplish a task. It is a little bit different to the Genghis Khan, identity at the core of someone's humanity. So can you talk a little bit about just how you see that connection between, hiring someone for, why would we need to look so holistically at identity versus just perhaps the traditional way of focusing on skills and capabilities to do the specific task?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a very simple example from banking, because a lot of times people are, I was dealing with someone from real estate and they're like, yeah, Shane, this is really, artsy fartsy stuff. But at the end of the day, I have 600 real estate brokers and I need them to sell, apartments in the marina or wherever. So how does this help me? And so let me give you an example of a search that I was doing for a CEO of an Islamic bank. And one of the CEOs during the interview, he said, and I'm asking him all kinds of questions like, how did, so if you want to test for identity and you're doing a search for an Islamic bank, a simple question to ask is just test if you know the history of your profession or not. So you ask, what's the history of Islamic banking and why is it important for society? And, one of the bankers says to me, Shane, I'm not an imam, okay? I'm a banker, and it doesn't matter if I'm working for an Islamic bank or a universal bank or a corporate bank, I make money. That's what I do. I deliver net profit. I deliver revenue growth. End of story. So cut the crap, end the questions. The next guy, I ask him, when did Islamic banking start and why is it important for Muslims? He said, Shane, what did you just say? I said, why is it important for Muslims? He's like, not important for Muslims. He's like, this is important for everybody. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what race you are. The fundamentals of Islamic finance safeguard your society, safeguard your community, and are the bedrock and foundation stone that every city around the world should have. And I am on a mission to make sure that these principles are spread around the world. And right now I'm working with Malaysia, Indonesia, and these cities on a national level and on an international level on spreading these processes apart. Now, let's fast forward what happened to these two CEOs. These are true stories, okay? Now, the first CEO, 3 years later, this guy gets sacked and his whole team gets sacked because he booked assets to make revenue. A lot of those assets were toxic. And all of a sudden, after 3 years, when the loans start defaulting, the bank's NPL shoot through the roof and the hatchet man's let loose. And this guy's released. Does he care? No, because for 2 years he made wicked bonuses. He cashes out and he goes to the next bank like a leech. He's not creating value. He's sucking it out of the market. The other guy, he was a CEO of an Islamic bank. Something happened within the bank at the very senior level that he didn't agree with. And he said, I can no longer work here. I am leaving. And here's my resignation. And you know what happened? He had 8 direct reports. Every single one of his direct reports walked out the door with him. And he said, guys, I don't have another job. Like, please stay in your role. He's like, no, we're following you. No, wherever you go, we're with you. We're your team. They will not leave his side. That is leadership. That is the difference. And that's how it transcends into every job you do. And I'll give you some examples here, where you have the difference, in these two. If my slide works, is my slide working? Does that answer your question, OP?
No, that's fantastic. Thanks, Shane. It's great to have that perspective.
So the difference between these two guys is one is saying, who are we? And we really are about helping society better itself. That is who the second CEO of the Islamic Bank was. The first one is like, when are we delivering this? Where are we delivering it? How much are we delivering? So these are the W questions. On the left side, it's more about who and why. And the other one is more about when, where, how much, where, what are we delivering? And the key question that with a lot of the senior people that I feel that they miss the ball is this one right here, is who will we become? And you need to answer that question if you want people, if people are going to follow you, if I'm going to join Peter Baker, I have to ask myself, I'm really answering the question, whether it's stated or not. And 99.999% of the time, it's never stated, but it's who I'm going to become. I'm going to take this job with Pete. Pete's really excited about working at Plastic Bag because it's about who he's becoming. He's helping the world be a better place. I'm speaking on your behalf as if you're not here, but obviously you're here, you can hear me. But that's what my purpose is. It's a statement of who you are, which is very strong with this institution and maybe not as strong with previous institutions that you've worked for. Fair enough.
No, and that's exactly true. And let me build upon that, because honestly, we've just done our engagement survey, our first ever engagement survey at Plastic Bank, and the connection between employees and the mission is really through the roof. So the scores around meaningful work, the scores around connection to the mission of the organization are just stratospheric compared to, in most engagement surveys, when you survey the staff, typically the meaningful work and the questions relating to purpose are amongst the lower. And so I think the lesson for me is, obviously, I'm in a lucky position now that our organization is just so obviously connected with doing good in the world, but not everyone is going to work for a social enterprise. And so the challenge for leaders is, how do you create that sense of purpose? How do you create that alignment to the mission, even if you're working in a bank or a trading company or or any other organization?
How could you say that? Even, watch the language here that Peter has used. Even if you're working in a bank, that is true. A very negative statement. I would say, what makes any society great is the financial department.
Absolutely.
Without finance, you can't have emancipation. It was, when you look at the ninja loan, which is what they hated in the financial crisis of 2008, they said the ninja loan did it to us. No income, no job, no assets, and banks should not give those kind of loans. But how did you get rid of slavery? You got rid of slavery by giving a man who has no job, who has no income, you gave them unsecured debt to buy their property so they could emancipate themselves out of slavery. And this was done by the bankers. And that's what Fannie Mae and all these organizations did. So every organization, every business has such a deep meaning in our society that we get glossed over by Excel sheets and revenues and net profits. We forget about the soul of our industries. And even banking is the most, one of the oldest jobs in the world is the treasury, the head of treasury, which goes back to the pharaohs of the guy who used to manage the treasure of the pharaoh and paid all the laborers and make sure everybody got paid. And it's finance, it's Babylon when they started using the first money, when you started to create banks and finance that you were actually able to have civilization. So sorry, you're just setting me off here.
I 100% agree with you, Shane, but that's really the thing, what we've got to look for. How do we find, select, and put leaders in place who can communicate that message, who can communicate that vision? Because honestly, I think we've all met leaders here in this region in institutions like banking, where it's all about task management, performance management, whereas the best of us, the best leaders, really do create that sense of identity, that sense of purpose. So I'm absolutely agreeing with you 100%. And the more that people like you in executive search integrate the identity and integrate purpose, integrate mission into the selection, the better chance we'll have of really connecting our people to the purpose of the institution.
And so the key question, obviously, that Pete, as well as a group CHRO, wants to answer is, how do we drive peak performance in this team? And it really seems like a simple statement, but it's actually quite deep. And it's not just loving what you do, but it's loving who you are and who you are becoming when you do it. And I'll just give you an example. It's like if a dog falls in a lake, it can swim across, say it's a small pond. The dog swims across, no problem, but it's exerting effort and it's exhausting itself. A fish, on the other hand, it doesn't swim across the lake. It's just being a fish and it will go across. And so you want to be like the fish. You don't want to be swimming. You want to be just being a fish. And, and a lot of us in our careers are like the dog swimming across the pond. We're pushing ourselves because we want to get to the other side, because maybe there's a fire hydrant over there, whatever we're going to go do on the other side of once we get to the other side of the pond, it's going to be so amazing. For those of us who are a bit longer in the tooth, we know it's not actually that amazing on the other side of the pond. It's just more of the same. And, and so it continues on, right? So you really don't want to be in a position where you're pushing yourself to do something. You really want to be in a position of becoming, and your work is a sense of becoming. And so the guys who were Spartans, they were becoming warriors. The people who were Mongols, they were becoming. And the guys who followed this Islamic banker out, they were on a mission, to make the world a better place. So you really need to find those people. And this is at the crux of all of your assessments. And I would go that people are like, oh, Shane, this is only for senior people. These are universal truths. If I'm hiring a junior salesperson, I want the guy who really believes sales is the best profession in the world, and they want to be, or I want the lady who wants to be the best sales professional in the world. You look at Zig Ziglar, they started life as a salesperson. They're going to end life as a salesperson. That's what you want. And you really want your leaders to understand that this is what you're doing. You're not managing people. You're helping them become the person they dream of. And once you start to shift your center of gravity to this point, you become immensely more effective as a leader. And you take time to listen. One of the key things that I learned from my dad was, when we were talking about assessments, was, can your CEO deliver a vision, was what I was saying when I was younger career. And my dad is always like, it's not about can he deliver the vision, he needs to articulate the vision of the team. And if you're sitting in a meeting, the two sentences, they might sound very similar, but they're miles apart. They're totally different. So the CEO who's articulating the vision of the team is sitting down and saying, hey, who do you want to become? This is where we're going. We're Plastic Bank. We're here. We're going to go to this. We're going to emancipate these people. We're going to save the world from plastic. You're going to become a humanitarian that makes money while saving the world. Is that the journey you want to go on? And some people might say yes. Some people might say no. This is at the crux of it. I don't know if you agree with that, Pete, or not.
No, absolutely. I think it's a great way to frame it, Shane. So let's keep going through, and let's talk about what are some of the ways to really identify this.
Yeah, I'll just drive the point home. I always say a job is like a boat. So the best day is, you're so excited whenever you meet one of your friends who just got a new job. It's like the new company is utopia. They're super excited about it. So this is Pete, actually. So he's super excited.
Very good.
He loves the company. And at a certain point, as one of the other executives I work with, he's like, look, Shane, there's only two ways that this relationship ends. Either you're going to fire me or I'm going to quit. So that's how it ends, right? Okay. So, you could retire on a positive note or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be as negative. Sometimes people quit in a very positive way. But what happened is, I'm so excited about this job and I'm so excited to quit this job, is that the sense of identity of the person is no longer being fulfilled by following the leader. And so when we look at leadership, the leader generally is prototypical of what the key traits of the group want to exhibit. And to give you another politically incorrect example, if you adopt this theory that I subscribe to of leadership, and you take something like Hitler, Okay, nobody wants to talk about Hitler, but let's say I had a time machine and you could go back in time and you could kill Hitler. Now, under the traditional leadership model, which is like the leader is, super, God theory, trait theory, that I have these superior traits so I can rally the masses and I can drive an agenda and I can lead the people. Under that theory, if you kill Hitler, you will kill the Nazi regime. You will not have the Nazi party rise to power. Under this theory, if you kill Hitler, it doesn't matter because the group is choosing a leader that's prototypical of the group behavior. And so another leader will then step into place. And the Nazi party is an expression of really the group think at the time. And Hitler just happened to be the guy that was pushed to the forefront. Maybe a little bit more maniacal than the next, or maybe less maniacal than the next, but it will be within the same ballpark. So this is really actually putting a stronger emphasis on followers, and that leaders are really expression of the group and that sense of identity and values. And that's where you start to see people saying, well, how does Donald Trump get elected as president? Well, he's representing the identity of the American people, which for some people was surprising. But in any event, and then at that point, as the identity of the group shifts, the leader is expelled. And you see that also with leaders like Winston Churchill, who was, the supreme leader of the world, as he, in the eyes of the Brits, as they fought the Nazis. And then after the war, he's ejected and dejected, as the identity of post-war England is dramatically different. And so at the crux of our behavior, at the crux of your group development is the identity, and what is identity you're handing to them. And a lot of people miss this point dramatically. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I'm sitting with a chairman or a CEO who is telling me about how great their team is, and at least 10 or 20, 30% of them are interviewing with me in the background saying, Shane, with the first chance, I can't wait to get out of here. So why is there such a super disconnect? And it's because you're not actually, as a leader, concerned about this identity theme, and it's not talked about. Correct me if I'm wrong, P. In your companies, is this a driving lodestar?
No, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And then I guess the intriguing part of the, as we think about the future of work and you think about different working models, is the long-term versus short-term approach to career management, right? And that's, I guess, what the way my CEO talks about it is we want absolutely 100% of every one of our staff for as long as they are here, but we're really starting to have these conversations about shifting identities and about, while you're here, you're going to be awesome. We're going to drive a connection between your contribution and purpose. But maybe in a year's time or 18 months, we part as friends and you go off and do something extra, right? So this concept of, bringing someone brings their full identity for a period of time, but also realizing that then it may be right for them and right for others to shift off elsewhere. It's a fascinating development that's really occurring. It's coming a lot out of the West Coast of the US, of almost gig-related employment at pretty senior levels. We see it in our organization. It's the first time I've experienced it before, so I'm certainly learning a lot about how to navigate within that model.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point. And, when you're looking at this case of a digital nomad or these kind of part-time workers, you still will have, so for example, if I bring a chief marketing officer in or a chief digital person in, they're going to be in my company for 6 months and they're going to leave. But that person will embody the identity that, hey, I'm a marketeer. Marketing is the most important function in society. Branding is everything. Your brand is everything. And I'm going to be oozing with this identity that, and when you meet someone who has this, they almost convert you. There's a high risk of conversion, because after you finish talking to them, you're like, man, I wish I was in marketing. Man, it's such an amazing job. And then you're like, I had a guy do this to me with selling makeup. he's selling makeup. And I came out of the interview and I was like, oh, I should quit, my job, and I should join with him, and I should be selling makeup because it's, you have all these colors and you have all these seasons. And I was like, wait a second, Shane, what's wrong with you? You're not going to go sell makeup. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing effect the candidate had on me, because identity is contagious. Because, the other paradox, this is for me, was when I discovered this blew my mind. And one of the paradoxes of our individual identity is that our identity is defined by the groups we belong to. And that is crazy. So in order to have your individuality, you need to join a group. And so you might say, oh, okay, I'm a Canadian, I'm a capitalist, I'm a this, I believe in da 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 da. And then all of a sudden, with all of these groups, it creates an individuality. When you're the leader, what's the toolkit that you're working with? And this graph here shows you one of the spectrums that you're going to be dealing with. And so when you hire a leader into your organization, the far left is obviously an extreme position. I'm not sure you want to be there where people are willing to die for your organization. It could also say that people will be willing to kill as well if they're on that side. It's an extreme stance. On the other side, you have the pure transactional person that, hey, I'm here for the money. And, I had a CEO like that. And, he said to me, Shane, I'm a prostitute. I'm just here for the money. And, I quit reporting. I was, within 6 months, I had another job and I wasn't working with that guy, and so you have to say, okay, where are we on this continuum? And everybody's in between. And so just going to the point that Pete was asking earlier is, how do organizations fit on this? So when you look at what are we doing is so important, I want to die for it. NASA astronaut, willing to die. I, not so much, not going to outer space, have no interest in going to Mars. I'll stay right here. Thank you very much. For some people, the FBI, these guys put themselves and these ladies put themselves on the line. You saw Al Jazeera journalists getting thrown in jail. For me, I would just quit. Like, hey, boss, because there was a threat. They said, if you guys continue, it wasn't like, surprise, you're in jail. Like, they had clear warnings. You guys keep doing this, you're going to go to jail. And these guys were like, yeah, no, I'm going to go to jail. Let's do this. I wouldn't. So that's on that side. I did not want to put the brands that are on the right hand of the scale, because it's not really going to help my career. So, but we all know, everybody's looking at this. Everybody's thinking they all have the brands, the ones that are transactional. So how does this work when you're driving peak performance? Now, the thing is that you can have somebody, this is like, in Pete's company, they have a very high value, really big, hey, we're helping the world. And then you'll have people who have very high standards of performance, very high results orientation. They're going to be the top performers. They're going to be top performers in the world. And this could be in any of your functions. It could be in your CFO function, your marketing, as you say, whatever function it is, supply chain. And on the other side, you also have the transactional based business, where it's like, look, I don't care about the world. I care about my bank account and what my bonus is. Yep. And at the same time, you can have extremely high performers there. So it doesn't mean that they're exclusive. Both groups have their own high performers. And then both groups have their low performers. It's somewhat harder to deal with a low performer in a value-based organization, because maybe, you value the relationship more. You don't want to kill people. Terminate people, let them go. And on the other side, in a transactional based organization, obviously someone's not performing, you're well within the culture to just throw them out the window, throw your coffee on them, abuse them, castigate them, like the famous scene in Glengarry Glen Ross, where Alex Baldwin's teaching the guys how to sell mortgages. If anyone's seen that scene, it's not, there's no PG-13 version available. Otherwise I'd show it to you. So what's the point then? You could ask me, Shane, if both models both deliver peak performance, then why would I care? Why would I make the extra effort? Because it's obviously a little bit more work to make the value-based organization. And the reason is that resilience. And you saw that when you're going into the COVID crisis, people who are value-based organizations, do not have the same level of attrition, do not have the same level of quitting. They are much more resourceful. They're much more innovative. They're much more creative. They're much more dedicated. They exhibit corporate citizenship. They're just not interested in building the revenue and net profit. They're interested in building the business. So are you building the organization and you're building the business? And so this becomes much more critical, especially as we head into a more volatile path. The other piece is that many people are saying, if you want to keep the Gen Zs, you need to be value-based, or you're not going to be able to keep them. That is that's up for debate, of course. The other piece that's based on resilience, that's a proven study. That's 100% proven. I don't know if you have anything to add here, Pete.
No, I think it's a super valid point, right? And I think that the key challenge for all of us to identify, where are we as individuals within our career? Where do you individually sit within the matrix? And that helps people guide their own career. But then, as we assess leaders, and part of this topic is all about assessing leaders, how do we look for the person that's going to create the right part of the matrix that works for our institution, right? Because honestly, there are perhaps some institutions, and particularly here in the Middle East, that believe they can get peak performance out of a pretty transactional relationship with their employees, right? And I'd prefer to have a transparent conversation with the board, with the senior leaders around, what is the employee value proposition we offer, and if frankly what we're primarily offering is a transactional financial relationship, but we believe that works for us, then we should be transparent about it, and hire people against that, right? When people talk about the classic kind of cultural, lack of cultural fit, it often is, potentially related to parts on this chart here. This is a fascinating chart here from Shane, where some people might say, well, I really want to work in an organization in that top left quadrant, but actually, what's being offered, the best case scenario from this employer is to be in the top right-hand quadrant, then you're going to have a values mismatch. And eventually you're going to probably end up in that bottom, in the bottom quadrant, because it's going to affect performance. So be transparent with yourself where you are on the quadrant. And then as you're hiring other leaders, be transparent around, what the value proposition of the institution is, and where you can legitimately, what type of leader you're looking to bring in that will manage kind of the appropriate place in the quadrant for your institution.
Yeah, and I think, Pete, you make a good point, and you touch on a delicate topic with some eloquence, as you say, there are groups that feel that having transactional relationships will drive peak performance, and you saw that in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, for example, where they pretty much built that culture of transactional leadership. And so it's really, you have to decide as a board, what kind of company are you? What kind of leaders do you want? And if you're going down this road, and either way, identity is still important, because these guys are now identifying as a transactional wolf, and that's what you need to build your systems around. And so, not everybody wants to be on the side where, hey, we're willing to die for what we do. When you do hit that, you do become much more, there's a lot of advantages. Your hiring cost goes down, for example. People will, in a value-based organization, they will take a pay cut. So best surgeons in the world who are earning millions of dollars a year will take a pay cut and work for free to go and spend a sabbatical for 1 year with Doctors Without Borders, and they will not accept a penny. They will work for free. Yep. And so I think that's something to also take in line. So when we look at this, I want to just give some examples now of CEOs that are in traditional businesses that actually do this phenomenally well. And so, the way that we come to these conclusions is that I'm interviewing CEOs that are in these traditional businesses, and they are basically not giving the answers you would expect. So this one, CEO of telecommunications, this was actually an interview I did with Usman Sultan, who is the CEO of Do. and he's ranked as one of the top telecom CEOs. I think he's no longer, I'm not sure where he is now, but I said, hey, so, how do you, same question Pete was asking me at the beginning, how do you drive a sense of purpose when, all you're doing is selling airtime and data? And he really was like, Shane, that is not what I'm doing at all. I'm shaping society. I'm defining how society is shaped. He said, what are you talking about? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, society has historically been developed. Cities are created about how we communicate. And so when you look at the Nile, you would have, Cairo based across the Nile, because that's how information flowed in ships, and we docked. And so our cities were coastal. He's like, now our cities will be round and it could be in the middle of the desert, because the way we communicate is digital. And so the whole way a smart city is configured is totally different than the way a traditional port city would have been created 100 years ago. And so I'm actually creating the way society is shaped. So, wow, this is what a sense of purpose this guy has. So we just go through another one. FMCG. So this was the chairman of Nestle for the Middle East, Yves Mangar, that I interviewed. These are real people. I don't know if they want me to name them or not, but when I'm meeting with Yves, I said, Yves, how do you do this? Like, value-based leadership is really important to Yves. And we were talking about this and, my charts and all that. And he says, Shane, we improve the way people's lives are every day. I said, what are you talking about? He said, if you have a mother who can't breastfeed and her child is going to die, whose breast milk whose kids' milk they use? They use Nestle. And it's true. Me and my team went to Ethiopia to help work at the orphanages. And when we asked them, what do you want? They requested Nestle's kids' milk, replacement milk. And so, and you think about, Pete's from P&G. What was the world like before we had disposable diapers? You don't want to even think about that. Very, very messy, stinky situation you'll be in. So thank God, a single mom has disposable diapers, huge impact on the quality of life. So I don't know if you guys want me to go through all of these. I'll just go a little bit quickly. This was the media company was Sam Barnett, the CEO of NBC. He said, Shane, media is the fourth estate. He said, what we do is so important. I've lost 18 people in the line of duty delivering the Arabic perspective from war zones. It's like, we covered Libya, we covered the Iraq war, we covered, this is the fourth estate of society. It's worth dying for. That's how important our job is. And here's an interesting one. So this is, somewhere you can easily be on the transactional side, selling real estate. He said, Shane, we offer the financially, a lot of these people are not, they're not stockbrokers. They don't know what to do with their life savings. We offer them the #1 wealth preservation opportunity in their life. And we're the Goldman Sachs of real estate. We make sure. And so, the way he positions with his sales team, it's not like, hey, I got a good villa on da 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 da. It's like, hey, man, put your money here. You're going to protect your wealth with us. Here's our investment track record. So just give you the flip side of how companies get this wrong. What happens? Obviously, Kodak, they saw themselves as a film company. What if they define themselves as an image capture company? Now, I'm showing you how identity really drives your performance of your organization to the fact that it can make the difference between being bankrupt or being very profitable. Blockbuster, they're in the videotape. Netflix offered themselves to Blockbuster for $50 million. Okay, they did not see themselves as an home entertainment company. They passed. Now it's what, 270 billion or something? It's like ridiculous. Borders was, Borders back, if you got anybody from North America, was a very successful bookstore chain, totally bankrupt now. So how you define yourself? I'll give you so this is on the corporate level. On a personal level, here's a lady who fought a polar bear. This picture is wrong. I'm sure probably made by the American press, but it's a Canadian lady, and a polar bear is obviously white. She fought a polar bear with her bare hands and lived to tell the tale. And why is that? And what drives that? And when I say these concepts are universal, this is at the crux of peak performance. What causes a person to fight a polar bear and win to the point that you didn't die? And the polar bear was like, you know what? I'm just going to let you be because you're a bit of too much of trouble here. And she's swinging, scratching at his eyes, kicking at it. And look at her. She's tiny. You wouldn't think twice that she's going to give you a whooping because she was a mother. That's her identity. And her child the bear wanted to eat the child. And she was protecting her child. And so that sense of purpose, that sense of meaning, that's where you're going to see peak performance. Whether you're managing yourself as an individual, as a professional, as a leader, you're managing a team, or as a group of executives, you're managing a corporation or a large group. You will not reach peak performance without touching on the soul, on the essence of identity of your team. So with no further ado, and the questions now that I'm going to give you are so easy to ask that it blows my mind, because I'll be dealing with a board and they'll be like, Shane, we got the best candidate. Okay, yeah, sure. He's got a Harvard MBA. Yeah, sure. He worked for your competitor. Yeah, sure. He has all the technical specs. But when I ask him, who are you? He says, oh, you know what? I'm pretty much retired. I just want one more swan song and then I'm going. Why did you choose to work in this field? Why? Do you love this industry? What's the reasoning? Here's a little bit of a doozy. It's a little bit of a curveball. So you compliment the candidate and you say, wow, Pete, man, and you have such amazing skills. You've led teams. You were leading 100 countries. You could transfer this. You could easily lead a consultancy, or, you could do so many different things. Did you ever think of switching to something sexier? Then Peter says, what are you doing? He should have an emotional reaction. What are you talking about? HR is amazing. I love it. I don't want to do anything else, should be the answer.
That is exactly it. I said that to you the other day. You were asking me these questions and I'm like, no, I'm a practitioner. I love HR. That is my identity, right? And I think that was, I would not be as successful if I went and did something else. And so, but being in the core of my identity, I realized that actually, working across different industries was something I was curious about. But at the core of my identity, I wanted to be a HR practitioner, not a consultant or a trainer or someone else like that, but a real practitioner. And that's my identity. It's different to somebody else's. And I think that it was Shane who asked me that question in the right way. And I think that's exactly the way to frame questions when you're testing any type of leaders. Understand what is it that is close to their identity, what is it that is their passion, because it's when people are able to bring their passion to their work that they're going to perform at their best. And so that, frankly, is the key insight that we need to get out of the selection process.
And I think this also gives you like a really live example. So when I go back to my example of a fish is not swimming, it's just being a fish. So I'm an executive search consultant. I'm going to assess people. So, I'm just having a casual conversation with Pete. I forgot about this. He's bringing it up now. And I want to test his identity. So I'm asking the question, and then you hear his answer. I'm a practitioner. That's what I want to do. Now, if you're hiring someone for an HR, how comfortable are you with someone like Pete who's saying, look, this is my job. I love my profession. And this is what I want to do. And I'm not going to switch. That's the answer that you want. And you want to inculcate this into your assessment protocols. Very simple questions that make a very, very big difference. Here's another question. What value does your industry provide to society? What would your world be like without this profession? And if you ask me that, you're going to have a long answer, because what greater skill set can you have than assessment of your leadership? Picking leadership makes companies, when you watch a country fail, it's because of its leadership. So you want to see someone who really sees the larger scope of the profession. Why? Because if they don't see it, how's the team going to see it? How do you transcend that into the team? So you go back to the bankers that you're hiring, and none of them actually see the larger role that it's playing in society. They're all focused on, what it's doing to their own personal bank account. A very simple question. Again, these questions are very easy to use. This one upsets a lot of people. Would you encourage your children to work in this field? Or would you encourage young people to work in this field and pursue this profession? You watch a lot of guys who will go to schools or go to high schools, and try to promote their profession, promote people to follow the path, because they feel that the more people who understand this profession in society, the better society will be. So, do you, or are you the kind of person who say, no, I would not wish this job on my child. I wish they would have, something better for them. I don't want them to go through what I've gone through. Personally, if I were to confess, a lot of the stuff that I make is actually for my son, because I want him to have a reference. If I get killed tomorrow, I want him to have a reference on how to assess people, because I think it's the most important skill set you can have, bar none. If there was only one thing that a company did correctly, was select and hire its leadership. That alone would ensure its profits. That alone would ensure its performance. You don't need to do anything else, in my opinion. Of course, the financier and the marketer and the sales, they're all going to tell you their own version. But that's how I feel about it, Pete, you're just looking at me like,
no, I think that's fantastic. And it's, I love the 50-50, right? You go back to the old Jack Welch thing. He would always say he would spend exactly half of his time building the business and half of his time building the organization, right? And he would make sure that that's it. 50% of his time was basically building, mentoring, selecting talent. And I think I have had too many conversations in also particularly in this region, and including with quite senior candidates who we were hiring for positions, where it's like, oh, I love HR because HR, they can take care of all the people stuff and I can get on with running the business. And honestly, if you have a leader that has that viewpoint, I would say they're sadly mistaken, right? The job of a leader is not just to deliver today's quarterly results, but to build the business for the future, which is the selection, which is the mentoring, the assessment, and all of those elements. And anyone who looks to outsource that to HR or a professional coach or anyone else like that, I think in my mind shows that they don't understand the holistic concept of running a business.
Absolutely. And now Peter has very cleverly chosen the example of Jack Welch, who of course was renowned for showing up at meetings with his head of HR. But if Peter was a chief marketing officer, he might have used Peter Drucker as an example, who Peter Drucker said there's only two things in business, which is finance and marketing. And, and so for each profession, each professional should feel that theirs is the most important, that theirs is the most celebrated, that theirs is the most impactful. And you want to have that sense, like Genghis Khan, I am the punishment of God. My, not that you'd want to be it's like a bit of an extreme example, but you want to have that feeling. And this is a simple question, but a lot of people miss it and say, what will you be doing 10 years from now? The way I ask it is, who will you be 10 years from now? And that's an epically different question to ask. And if it's not in line with who you want to be as an organization, if it's not in line with who you want to be as a team, you have a very bad leadership selection on your hands. If it is, then you have a great selection. Why do people from NASA quit working at NASA and join SpaceX? Because Elon Musk says, I'm the man who's going to colonize Mars. Again, like a Genghis Khan statement, that's a pretty big identity statement. I'm going to colonize Mars. They quit because they want to be, that's the person they want. I want to be part of the team that colonizes Mars. I want to be that. Personally, I do not, but it's for courses. And that is it. So those are your 6 questions that you can ask, the test for identity. And of course, there's a lot more to this leadership skill set that we want to go through that you can grab in our book, CEO Assessment Selection. You can buy directly from our website, tpgleadership.com. You can send me a message. My mobile is right there. You can call me. I'm a people person. I'm in the people business, so I love getting calls. And if you Google search CEO Assessment Selection, you will see that our content is actually, organically being chosen by the market as the #1 content on this subject matter. And we're just continually rising up. We're #1 spot, #2 spot, #3 spot, #4 spot. We are continually rising up in this. And by popular demand, if you want to just even get a free sample of the book on the website, if you go to the book page, you can download a free sample of the book there. And there's a second free sample that you have to ask me for the password. if you want. So that's for the people who are like, look, I want to read 2 chapters of the book before I buy it. That's available as well. I'll warn you, the book's not cheap. The book's $250 because it's the only book available that you can ramp up that has 450 questions that you can ask in a CEO interview. And we also have the first and only certified CEO Assessor Course backed by SP Jain School of Global Management. SP Jain, when Peter was working for Procter & Gamble, was a school that they used to hire campus recruit from. That's how good of a school it is, with campuses in Dubai, Mumbai, Singapore, and Sydney. It's a 2-day course, but more importantly, I have brought you the top instructors in the region. You have Iyad Malas, Group CEO of Al Ghurair Group, former Group CEO of Majid Al Futtaim, talking about how he selects CEOs. You have Ahmed bin Sulayem, Chairman and CEO of DMCC, Chairman of Dubai Gold Exchange, Chairman of Dubai Diamond Exchange, founder of Dubai Crypto Exchange. He has over 10 CEOs reporting to him, talking about how he selects the CEOs. You have Amin Al Husseini, former CEO of Oman Air Bank. You have the chairman of MAP Sciences and former CEO of IVF Fucky, Ziad Makazumi. You have the CEO of Dubai campus for SP Jain School of Business. You have myself. You have one of the best practitioners. I think Pete's going to join in as well. I'm not 100% sure.
That's my plan. Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be fun.
So I literally assembled one of the top instructing teams for you. And if you buy now, the early bird price it's only $999. And it's basically, if you're interested in assessment, it's the most awesome course that you can take. And you can come and visit us at www.tpgleadership.com. You can download some of our free assessment frameworks. You can also watch the video on the frameworks, and hopefully you can take the course. So I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. I'm happy to take them as we have a few minutes.
Well, there was a question from Radar around, is it possible to change or amend your identity along the way? Talk a little bit about that, Shane.
Well, I think absolutely. I mean, and often when negative events happen to us, because I want to talk a little bit about the negative, because there's this huge happiness philosophy that goes on. But, if all of a sudden somebody, for example, when Gandhi, obviously the guy who threw the British out of India, it wasn't until he was thrown off the train that negative experience had almost killed him. It totally shifted his identity. And he was like, I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to have a little bit of a professional career. And now all of a sudden he's like, no, I'm going to fight for Indian rights, for civil rights. And that totally was a massive shift. And he then said to himself in his memoirs, in his bio, he says, I realized while I stood in the jungle on the side of the tracks that I didn't know what it really meant to be Indian. And I had to get in touch with my roots. And so that shift happens. So there will be dramatic changes that shifted. As a leader, every time you stand up, you have the opportunity to shift the identity of the group. And as a group, when you march together, you have the opportunity to make a shift in identity. You saw a massive shift in the American identity when the Trump supporters ransacked the Capitol. At that point, that was a decisive shift where Americans were like, hey, wait a second, this is going too far. We're not all about this, like, hey, pump the brakes. And all of a sudden there was a big shift in the identity of that party. And they started to throttle back on supporting this leader. And he was expelled as a leader at that point, in my opinion. Of course, this is highly debatable, but absolutely. I mean, you definitely will. I don't know how much time I have, but I have a quick story just to tell you. There was a guy on a ship, and he was the lowest worker. He was just a laborer, and he was throwing garbage over the edge. And this 100-pound bag of garbage grabbed his arm, and when he threw it, he went flying over the edge into the ocean. Of course, when you throw garbage in the ocean, the sharks come. So the boat sails away, and the guy is like, I'm going to die. I'm going to get eaten by a shark. And his life flashes before his eyes. And he realized that he had been living his whole life in fear. And he said, if I survive this, I'm not going to have fear anymore. Of course, the boat comes back, saves him, and he becomes a multimillionaire running one of the biggest breweries in Germany. And he says, he wouldn't live with fear anymore. So yeah, short answer, yes, you can, 100%.
Very good. And so we come right up to our 2 o'clock stop here, Shane. Any kind of last words of advice for the audience? And then also, what can they expect as we head into next week's session?
I would really love it if people just said, the two questions you want to ask yourself: who am I? Who do I want to become? And if people are going to come with me on this journey, who will they become? Who are we becoming as a group? And I think that will have a huge impact on your performance and the way you approach your career management. Next week, we're talking about managers. We're going to talk more about the management side. And so when we come and we assess a CEO, we want to say, and I'm reporting back to the board, can the CEO manage a team? And that answer is yes. Often that answer is no. What are the key elements that I look for? There's 7 key things that we're going to look at that we want to see in somebody who's effective at managing a team from our perspective. Pete, obviously coming from the pedigree of team management, P&G wrote the book on it. They have one of the most advanced programs. I'm sure he's going to have his own opinion. And that is next Wednesday, November 24th at 1 p.m. Dubai time. So look forward to it.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. We'll invite you along next week to continue this discussion. Thank you, Shane, for your continued passion and energy in bringing this topic to life. If you want to see more of Shane Phillips, watch out on Friday evenings for his favorite TV show called Bedazzled, where Shane Phillips, along with myself, present Career Tip Time on B4U TV in Dubai at 7:30 p.m. on Friday nights. The show is doing very, very well, and our Career Tip Time segment is one of the featured highlights of a show that is all around current events and what's happening here in Dubai. And managing your career is a fun part of that. So look out for that, 7:30 on Friday. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Bye for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, Georgina.
Hi.
Hi, Suzanne. So many people here. Laurent and
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Hey, Shane, good session.
pardon?
Good session.
Excellent.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.